Usually, there are certain groups of people who are seen as the perpetrator for all the adversities they soured upon particular communities, being handed with all those blames, getting framed as the villains for causing bountiful afflictions without any sort of sympathy to be seen in their stone-cold, soulless eyes. Truly the lowest of all human beings in the world. That's how it all works. Groups of people are held accountable to all those violative acts, and not problematic individuals. It's almost hilarious to witness how that skewed system works. People's beliefs are seen as their whole personalities, their ideologies speaking for themselves and not their sole accents, getting judged as the collective whole, which, as we all know, works tremendously well. Generalization being birthed from extreme prejudice feels like it should be a long gone issue, but is rampant all over the world, and in certain places it's even worse. While we should be tackling obstacles bigger than ourselves for the sake of our species' survival, we are left in this mess which never seems to be solved, because some individuals just never change, or more so how they choose to be around certain people. Their decision to demean them is almost habitual. They grew up in a surrounding that detested them, so they just follow their parental figures. It's not a problem that can be solved overnight or over a couple of decades. It's deeply rooted in countless isolated members of our, dare I say, society. I couldn't think of any other word for it. And to continue these serious themed-based monthly videos of mine, where the interest is looking at various social and societal downfalls of humanity through the lens of films, a medium which I wholeheartedly believe is the strongest when placed against other media formats. And for this occasion, I have chosen an Asian title, because they are better at depicting those drawbacks of humankind. And this particular film goes by the name of Bedevilled, a South Korean thriller with horror-like elements which came out on 2nd September 2010 and is another revenge tale about a woman stuck in unfortunate conditions. Directed by Jang Cheol-soo, making this his first feature-length film, previously working as an assistant director in numerous other projects and releasing a short film a couple of years ago. His entire filmography is vastly different than the title I'm choosing to focus on. Yes, some themes do seem to follow in each of his works, probably an influence from directors he worked with in the past. However, his other films generally lean towards drama, romance, or comedy genre, even though some of those titles have a bit of serious undertones underneath all those veils of light-hearted entertainment. Still, none of them come close to how horrific Bedevilled gets, both visually and thematically. Scouring on the surface level leaves you immensely hopeless with the hapless situation of our core characters, and digging deeper doesn't lead to any distinct outcome. It gets more and more morbid by the minute while portraying a tremendously terrifying outlook of our shattered society. So, as usual, let's get done with what the premise of this film is all about, and then I can peacefully get into the focal talking point. That being the brutal and bitter reality of our lives as a whole. After a montage of city life, with what sounds like an audio log of some sort playing in the background, we are quickly introduced to one of our major characters, Haewon, a single woman with a stern aura around her, working in a bank located in Seoul. And after a series of work-related issues, which was directly caused by her hyper-competitive mentality, she is suggested by her boss to take a break from work and, potentially, take a vacation. A change of events that doesn't delight her by any means, who just retreats to her apartment to drink away her sorrows, eventually coming to the conclusion that it isn't working out for her. So, she decides to go back to the place she spent her childhood, and maybe reconcile with her long-forgotten friend whose letters she ignored. Modo Island, a desolated isle located in the southwest corner of the Korean peninsula. While arrival, she gets a warm welcome from her friend of teen years, Kim Boknam. But for simplicity's sake, I will refer to her as Kim. A vastly different surrounding than the city Haewon was grown accustomed to. The darkest side of humanity is bluntly shining in that remote island, where Kim is treated and regarded as a slave, with constant abuse from her husband, his brother, and bunch of elderly women. Her mother-in-law being the most vocal one out of them all. Just an overall obnoxiously obscene family structure. Yeonhee, Kim's daughter, is the only person in that island whom she cares about, and reserves the limited amount of love that is left in her beaten until broken soul and body. Haewon is stunned by the treatment that Kim has to endure, but doesn't aid her or her daughter in escaping that place, and Kim herself is doubtful of it after a handful of failed attempts in the past. Well, with the introductory section out of the way, I can get to the segments where I can discuss about how brute this film is with its message and what it wants to get across. There is nothing subtle about it, excluding some scenes where it tries to keep it to just implications and bunch of backstory elements that are kept under the wraps until the runtime runs out. Let's begin with what sort of person Haewon is. In the beginning, she, along with a huge group of people, witness a woman getting chased and punched by a bunch of crooks. Nobody tries to help her, or, in the least, call the police to make them aware of that situation, which leads to that woman getting badly wounded from all those beatings. However, after a couple of calls from the authorities, Haewon does comply to assist the officers into identifying the assailants, but fails to nail down on the details to get them locked up, not being up to the cooperation level that was needed in that scenario, not wanting to be involved in that whole ordeal, requesting them to not disturb her anymore, even if it can potentially lead to the death of that woman. Her agitated behavior towards the customers she deals and colleagues she works with nicely sets up what sort of character she is, accusing them for being incompetent while handling their affairs, while she herself can be faulted in taking similar poor decisions. Her personal judgment has led to far worse outcomes than the ones we have seen so far in this film. But let's focus on other questionable characters for a moment, who are abundant in this story. For example, Dae-soo, the boatman who recognizes Haewon, complimenting on her current beauty, and when she was a child, which is continued when she reaches the island, with all the elderly women who are residing there taking an envious fascination to her white skin and youthful body, rather than asking how the trip was or her general well-being. Kim's mother-in-law being the only person who doesn't like her arrival, asking her when she is going back to the mainland, basically being the spearhead of all the wickedness there, who doesn't even allow Kim's daughter to get basic education, as by doing so, she will run away from them, no matter how much Kim herself wants or tries to get her daughter educated. Kim, as a character, from the first instance we get to witness her, is portrayed as an unfortunate individual. From the brief flashback, we are made aware of the clothing difference between her and Haewon, which is continued in the following scenes, almost identical rugged clothes and reserved etiquette, until she notices the boat boarded by Haewon, waving excitedly in her direction. A small and short detail is shown here, her physically recoiling backwards when the boatman demands her to stop touching Haewon's white and beautiful skin with her tanned and dirty hands. A brief outlook of the condition that Kim has to survive in, long-term physical abuse from her husband and sexual assaults from his lustful brother, which might be in agreement with him, even though it's usually the women who work harder and have more tasks to complete, from growing and looking after the vegetables to collecting seashells to sell to outsiders. And on top of that, they even assist the men in their jobs. Still, all of them think that they wouldn't survive without their hard-working men, while Kim doesn't even get any actual acknowledgement for her laborious work. Well, it wasn't only the lustful lazy men or envious elder women who were transfixed by Haewon's beauty. Kim doesn't allow her to wash her own clothes, saying it's too delicate and pristinely white to do so. Even her daughter is quite obsessed with her physical attributes and the way she presents herself, as she too wants to be appealing like her one day. A perfect example of what growing up in such an environment does to a young mind. Eventually, we get to know why Kim was sending all those letters, as she, along with her daughter, want to migrate to Seoul, hoping that Haewon might assist them in that process. But she declines her request, stating that she is an adult and shouldn't ask for help from others to look after her. All this after witnessing the nightmare circumstances she is in. Even though she cannot fathom how she can reside amongst those islands' inhabitants, from her husband sleeping with other women, something that her daughter and mother-in-law knows about, but Kim just lets all of that slide down as being a small locality thing. You know, the classic toxic environment of staying together no matter what other members might do or say. Ultimately, this destructive mentality is broken when it is implied that Kim's husband might be grooming their daughter. Nothing is explicitly shown to confirm this, but judging from their behavior, it isn't implausible. Still, even this wasn't enough for Haewon to save Kim from her insane in-laws, who thinks she is lying about that to get her service, as she remains indifferent to not being involved in complicated situations. However, she had her doubts, and to clear it up, she tries to indirectly question Kim's daughter. But before any of those claims can be validated, her grandmother arrives there just in time to not let it happen, revealing two vital points in quick succession, proclaiming that Kim said all of that because she has been a beggar her whole life and that Yeon, his father, isn't his biological parent. Kim's past failed attempts doesn't stop her from deciding to flee with the woman her husband escorts for his pleasure, just so her daughter isn't forced to follow the same footsteps as her. However, the boatman is in cahoots with Kim's husband and betrays the three of them who are taken back to the island, where Kim is again subjected to beatings from her husband. Another scenario where nobody tries to stop that from happening. Only this time, everyone is vocalizing to do even more evil and vile acts to her. And as usual, her mother-in-law being the most expressive about it, disclosing that her son can do that as he gave her and her daughter a shelter to live in. Kim rebuttals by revealing that the only reason they did was because she was sexually assaulted by multiple men from a young age. Hence, the uncertainty to the identification of her daughter's actual father. And amidst all this struggle, Kim's daughter is knocked down headfirst onto a rock by her stepfather. And to cover up their murderous track, they call in an investigator from the mainland, whom Kim's mother-in-law personally knows. So, we all know how all of that panned out. Even though he was suspicious of that situation, which was elevated by Kim declaring that her husband killed her, he is quickly persuaded to believe otherwise, Kim's mother-in-law and other elderly women aiding the killer. Haewon was asleep when all of that happened, so again, she can't do much about Kim's case. However, this isn't the first time for her basically turning a blind eye to her issues. Another flashback scene gives us more insight to what sort of relationship they had in the past, in which she abandons Kim to fend for herself when confronted by a group of boys who were up to no good. Kim finally reaches her boiling point, realizing that no one or nothing can change her life in that island unless she takes matter into her own hand, going on a bloody rampage for revenge, killing all the elderly women, forcing her mother-in-law to jump from a cliff, and beheading her husband's brother, the latter being witnessed by Haewon, who thinks that she might have gone crazy, still not coming to terms about Kim's ill-fated reality, as she gives away her location when she was about to kill her husband and the boatman. Nonetheless, in due course, she does give them a bloody send-off. By that time, Hae-won managed to escape that island, soon followed by Kim, who finds herself in a foreign setting, being doubtful of every man who tries to help her. Someone who was exploited by them their whole life is bound to question the real motives behind all those friendly actions, hesitating to buy that nice people exist at all. In a plot twist fashion, it is shown that Hae-won wasn't asleep when Kim's daughter was killed, as she is haunted by those memories. Not in my opinion, as it was pretty much on character for her to deliberately do so. Kim, knowing that, comes to the police station she was in to end her life too, but gets shot from the injured officer and ends up dying by the hands of Hae-won from the flute they shared when they were young. Saying that this film was tough to watch would be an understatement. However, it makes up for a really competent revenge story, which is quite rare these days, as most people just want to see good guys win and bad guys lose. Yes, Kim dies in the end, but she gets a retribution before her eventual demise, and even gave each and every islander a proper burial, no matter what they did to her in the past. And Hae-won finally overcomes to her fear of dealing with unpleasant situations, verifying the identity of the assailants who assaulted the woman earlier. It concluding with her finally reading all the letters she threw away. Another bittersweet ending. Even though she killed Kim under self-defense, in the end of the day, she was a friend, which, by the looks of it, was quite rare for her. Always deciding to go alone and being self-reliant made her life lonely. Someone who is trying to run away from her past and regrettable actions that she made in a hurry. Kim's entire past was up in the airs too. Who were her parents, or any knowledge about her origins? Which, if we go by the implied elements, it just leads to some very depressing outcomes. That's what this film leaves you with. A depressed feeling about our lives, the endless chase for desiring fairer skin, and orthodox beliefs that are self-damaging. Internal conflicts is extremely common amongst communities. Having deplorable ideals isn't limited to a certain group. It doesn't count what preference, gender, race, religion, belief, or whatnot one has. Fucked up persons do fucked up shit. Hurt people hurt more people.